Just support Tom!
Hey everyone, OptimusTom here, and I am going to be doing something a little bit different today for some of the card art paper pioneer games that we were doing earlier this week. This is going to be something that you all, as my subscribers or people viewing my YouTube page, have kind of voted on to do this time around, which is basically doing a VOD review of the games. And the biggest reason why we're doing this VOD review in the first place is because I didn't have to cast last weekend. We had Kyle and Frenchie on the microphone over at Card Art's Tuesday Night Paper Pioneer, and that meant that I was able to actually play the event, which is something I don't think I've done since like the end of May, maybe beginning of June at Card Art, when we first started setting up the streams and kind of getting this stuff going. So what we're going to be doing today is going through the matchup that I played, kind of taking a couple of notes and noting what I did well, what I could improve on, where I may have won or lost games, and just kind of in general getting some kind of fundamental foundation as to how you can approach some of your own matchups, whether it's a meta matchup or a bit of an unknown rogue style deck like this. Now, of course, it doesn't help the fact that I wasn't really playing a meta deck to begin with. I was playing, a couple of months behind the meta. But I decided I wanted to try my Rakdos Sacrifice deck out for a little bit. My buddy Vinny down in SoCal had been playing this during the RCQ season towards the start of RCQ season and actually qualified for the RC by playing Rakdos Sacrifice. So I figure I really like Sacrifice. I really like Aristocrat style decks. I've been playing Waste Not before we started streaming for a little while, so I decided to kind of pivot back to something I've been playing a couple Pioneer seasons ago and to kind of see where it's at in the meta game right now. Well, turns out I didn't necessarily have the best testing against the meta. I did wind up going to the store and figuring out that, okay, things are a little bit different looking right now, and the deck might not necessarily be as powerful or as good in certain matchups or as bad in certain matchups as it used to be. But now kind of with that like big long-winded introduction out of the way, you can see that the deck is on your screen. This is a list that Matthias Lavunga had been playing. Only difference between his deck and the deck that I was running is that I do not have a copy of Tears of Valakut, which was one of in his sideboard. So instead, I wound up playing a copy of Kolaghan's Command. There are a couple of Is It in Soul decks. There are a couple of artifact-themed decks that are at our specific store. So I felt like this was a bit of a hedge against some of the players that I know play at the store, as well as the fact that we have a decent amount of blue-white control players and just Lotus Field control players at the store. So the discard effect from that very powerful kind of thing, being able to get back like a Mayhem Devil or something that got destroyed early on, very powerful. But the list in and of itself, this is the Rakdos Sacrifice deck. It revolves around Mayhem Devil being able to kind of, whenever things get sacrificed, which include a lot of your own things and sometimes your opponent's things, it able to deal 1 damage to any target. You usually wind up bashing your opponent in the face. If you're playing against a deck that's a little more aggressive, you wind up kind of board wiping them by playing a lot of different types of effects that get sacrificed. The main one is, of course, the Cauldron Familiar Witch's Oven combination. You're able to sacrifice the cat, that triggers Mayhem Devil, sacrifice the food, that triggers Mayhem Devil, and then the cat comes back, and you can deal 3 damage to your opponent's face or 2 damage spread across, as well as draining your opponent for 1 life. This is able to keep you alive in certain situations. You can block and before damage, sacrifice the cat, nothing gets done as long as they don't have trample. It usually winds up having a bunch of other synergies with sacrifice effects as well, like Pioneer All-Star Blood Tithe Harvester. You're able to sacrifice it in order to give something -X, which are double the amount of blood tokens that you have. You can sack the blood tokens. Those all trigger the Mayhem Devil. Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. When it doesn't escape, it has to sacrifice. You can respond to that sacrifice trigger by using the Witch's Oven to get 2 foods, which is important for Cauldron Familiar when they have targeted graveyard hate cards, because you can respond to their target by sacking another food. So Kroxa, just also a very powerful mid to late game threat, just sitting in your graveyard to be kind of escaped or brought back from the dead, basically, in order to kind of grind down your opponent. There's also a couple copies of Unlucky Witness. This is basically a card advantage engine. When it dies, you can exile the top couple of cards from your library, top 2 cards. You can play one of them until the end, until your next end step. So you do this on your opponent's turn. You sacrifice the Witch's Oven. You basically get to see 3 cards, 2 of which you get to play, including the draw for your turn. bunch of spells that are able just to disrupt your opponent. You have targeted removal spells like Fatal Push and Bitter Triumph. You have the ability to Thoughtseize, which is only 2 main deck and 2 sideboard. Fable the Mirror Breaker, very powerful card. It makes treasure tokens, which sacrifice in order to add mana, so very good there. You also get to kind of loot away or replace cards with its chapter 2 by drawing up to 2 if you discard up to 2. Then we also have effects that add to the sacrifice theme. Deadly Dispute, very powerful card advantage engine when you want to be getting rid of things yourself. So you wind up sacrificing like an Unlucky Witness, you look at the top 2 cards, then you wind up drawing 2 cards, and you make a treasure token. It's a huge amount of tempo boost in some of these matchups. Then you wind up seeing Claim the Firstborn. This is basically a removal spell because as long as your opponent's creature is converted mana cost 3 or less, you're able to steal it, you can attack with it, you can do whatever you want with it, and then tap Witch's Oven to sacrifice it so it's gone from the game. Tons of different types of effects like that. Furnace Rains is another one. It doesn't matter the size of the creature. It's 3 mana, so you're able to steal any creature, and you also get a treasure token when you do so with that one. Bunch of different lands, a couple of basics of each type. We have the creature lands from Adventures from Forgotten Realms with Hive of the Eye Tyrant, as well as Den of the Bugbear. Hive gets rid of problematic cards in the opposing graveyard. Den of the Bugbear creates tokens, which can be used as sacrifice fodder. And then a slew of Rakdos colored dual lands. There is no Takenuma in this list. Instead, we're running Castle Locthwain to kind of draw some extra cards and grind the game out if it goes late. Sunken Song, Crucible Defiance gives you 2 1/1 spirit tokens. They're sacrifice fodder. They can kind of, in a pinch, be used end of turn and then able to kind of deal 2 damage, pop both of them with Mayhem Devil. That's 4 all of a sudden, so powerful effect there. And then Ramanamp Ruins is a 2 damage burn spell if you tap 4 and sacrifice a desert, which is the only desert in our deck, but triggers Mayhem Devil, so it deals additional damage, so it's like lightning bolting somebody. Then the sideboard has a whole bunch of different kinds of effects. You have Graveyard Hate, you have Hand Disruption, you have Damping Sphere to kind of hate on the bigger mana decks in mono green, which was a big problem for the Rakdos sacrifice deck way back in the day. Soul Guide Lantern is an addition to be kind of targeted graveyard hate and kind of punish people for putting a Phoenix in their graveyard early. Blot Out is going to be used mostly for Vein Ripper. Vein Ripper is a big problem for this deck because if Vein Ripper sticks around, your cat loops basically kill you. Any sort of sacrificing of creatures you do basically kills you, and it's very difficult to steal the Vein Ripper because you have to sacrifice your own creature, which basically kills you. So you need kind of things to get rid of that Vein Ripper. Ashiok Dream Render's in there to kind of hedge against the Phoenix decks. It shuts off Court of Calling in the Amalia decks. It shuts off Enigmatic Incarnation, those kinds of things. Then a couple of anti-control cards with Obnixilis, Kolaghan's Command we talked about at the beginning of this. And then it's a Giganta deck, so you have Giganta, which you actually wind up casting a non-zero amount of times in these games. So that's kind of a quick run-through of the deck. If you already know what the deck is, well, you probably skipped ahead to this part in the video anyway. But we are now going to be able to go over the game that I wound up playing, which was not traditional, as you can see on above me up there. It was a Rakdos sacrifice against what was being called Naya Infinite or Naya Combo. So I had no real idea what was going on in this matchup. So as we hop into the actual game and Frenchie and Kyle kind of take us through it, I'll be going over what my mindset was playing against a deck that I had no real idea of what it was doing, and then also kind of talking through my plays, seeing how the matchup panned out, and seeing what I did right, what I did wrong, what I can improve on, and how the matchup basically went. So let's get underway.
All right, and we're back for our show.
All right, so we're going to listen to Kyle and Frenchie as they take us through this matchup, and we'll kind of just be discussing some of the things that were going on in this game, as well as talking about some of the lines that I was going through and what was going through my head while this matchup was going. I might turn away from the camera just so I can look at this screen where I have the thing maximized for a little bit, but I'll be right underneath myself here. So game number 1, I do wind up being on the play, which is pretty strong while winning the die roll, not just in Pioneer in general, but for this specific Rakdos sacrifice deck. As you can see, I started off with that Unlucky Witness, playing against a tapped Sacred Foundry. I might be a little bit afraid of a burn spell or something, or just the colors of mana in general, but I have a very aggressive hand. You can kind of see I have a Mayhem Devil in my hand, in addition to the fact that I started with Unlucky Witness and this Blood Tithe Harvester. I also have a Claim the Firstborn in my hand, so when I see this Magda, I'm already kind of, I'm just going to pause while I go through some of this stuff. I see this Magda right here, and I'm thinking, okay, Magda has been played in kind of 2 decks that I can remember. One of them is the Dwarves deck that had all sorts of vehicles that you were piloting, you were kind of crewing and going off of, kind of like the Kaladesh block one. But since I didn't really see Toolcraft Exemplar, and this one is Naya instead of straight Boros or Mardu, thinking it's not that, which means that when you see Magda, you're thinking treasure tokens. You're thinking Portal to Phyrexia. You're thinking Dragon Lord Atarka, like these very powerful kinds of things. So when I see this Magda, it's basically a kill on sight because I'm assuming it's going to start generating a lot of value, whether itself or other dwarves kind of come into the picture. So I know that I'm almost immediately going to try to deal with this card. So I sit there, I think, for a little bit. I have this Claim the Firstborn in my hand, and I have a Deadly Dispute as well. So this is basically just me wanting to get rid of the Magda the cleanest way possible. This also gives me a lot of value because I'm able to steal their card and then sacrifice it after combat to the Deadly Dispute. So I get a treasure. I'm able to sacrifice the thing to Deadly Dispute, get a treasure, and then draw 2 cards on top of it. And this is just, you know, a 6 life attack or 6 damage attack that I'm able to do as well. So this is just a massive, massive tempo swing, and why you have those cards like Claim the Firstborn and stuff like that in the deck to begin with. So you see there's the follow-up Deadly Dispute that I had in my hand. Gets me 2 additional cards. I think I wind up having 4 cards in hand at the end of this turn, in addition to 5 mana altogether, and I wound up drawing a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I have 2 Fable of the Mirror Breakers, a Mayhem Devil, and an Unlucky Witness. So Mayhem Devil means that all of these treasures and this blood token are going to be dealing damage to my opponent. I can wind up sacrificing this Bloodtide Harvester if I want, and my opponent then interestingly follows up with a treasure map. So now I'm thinking, okay, this is definitely something with treasures. The deck might not be as fast as I'm thinking, and Magda may wind up just being their engine card. So I really just kind of want to end the game as fast as possible because I don't really want to be put behind from this scenario. And I'm kind of thinking like, all right, well, they don't have double red, so I'm not going to be worried about like main deck Anger of the Gods or anything yet. I mean, they could just play that and then Anger of the Gods, but if they have Magdas and stuff, I'm not thinking they're running those in their main deck. So I just start off with combat like you probably should in most turns. I just bash in for 4 more damage, get my opponent to 9. And then I decide I'm going to kind of set up my board here, go for this Mayhem Devil because I know that I could potentially follow this up with a Fable of the Mirror Breaker to immediately deal 2 additional damage to my opponent's face, which is what I do. So this winds up dealing 2 damage to my opponent, and then I slam this Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So now I have a commanding board position, and if they have a board wipe, I'm a little bit behind. I do wind up having an additional Fable to restock if I have to. I have an Unlucky Witness. I'll get, as long as it's not an exile effect, I'll get 2 cards off the Unlucky Witness on my board. So I'm not too worried about walking into that or overcommitting since I have a decent amount of stuff in my hand. But my opponent instead just winds up tapping out to play an Asika's Chariot, which while it does create kind of 2 blockers in this circumstance, with my Mayhem Devil out, I have at least the representation of 2 damage to be able to be pinged from as we kind of figure out what cats we want to use. And funny story, this is actually my opponent's significant other's cats that he has on their tokens, so pretty cute. I can kind of resonate with that. I have our own cats on our own cat tokens I use in Goose Fang, so... but I have at least 2 damage represented on this board because I have the Bloodtide Harvester sack effect, I have the blood, and then attacking with the Goblin Shaman actually gives me a treasure token as well, so I know I have at least 3 damage. So that means I just need 4 additional damage, which I could potentially get if I swing, but it's a little bit risky. If he double blocks my Mayhem Devil, I can't do that stuff post-combat. If I tap my Bloodtide Harvester, then I can't do that post-combat either. Instead, I draw my card for turn, I pitch my Unlucky Witness, that winds up getting me a Witch's Oven and a Cauldron Familiar. So now my opponent is just dead on board here, because I'm going to be able to cut Oven Loop, which deals 3 damage, then I have 3 additional sacrifice damage that I was talking about before, and then I'm just going to be able to dome my opponent for at least 1 more damage.
So this engine right here is going to present enough damage to be able
So Duncan here, my opponent, is kind of sees the writing on the wall, starts kind of counting all the stuff up. We see he winds up going down to 6. He should be at one lower, but it looks like that the casters are just kind of going through the motions here and figuring out. Yeah, he winds up taking a bunch of damage, goes down to 2, and then I have the Blood Tithe Harvester, and then I can attack with the Goblin Shaman, and then sacrifice the treasure token, and that's basically all she wrote in that circumstance. That's basically going to be complete dead on board, and I actually do not see a lot from Duncan in this game. I see a Magda, I see a treasure map, and I wind up seeing a Seeker's Chariot. So I am still kind of thinking this is, okay, we're crewing a bunch of stuff, we're creating a bunch of dwarves, or creating a bunch of tokens with our Magda as our dwarf and trying to figure out where we're going from there. So game number 2, I kind of go into everything, and I have no real idea what I'm going to be sideboarding in. I do wind up taking out some cards and actually going for my sideboard. And what I kind of decide on is, how do I wind up losing a game to an unknown deck? And the kind of thing that I come up with is, all right, if this is a deck that's sort of like a Portal to Phyrexia combo deck, which is, or something that's like, okay, I'm finding Atraxa, or not Atraxa, but like Dragon Lord Atarka because Magda can find dragons, or some other dragon I'm not thinking of. These are big, powerful creatures. So I wind up bringing in my 2 copies of Blotout, and I bring in 1 additional copy of Furnace Reigns, and then I bring in a Bitter Triumph in case I need to kind of kill whatever Duncan is able to find on site. In order to do that, I need to take out a couple of cards, and I believe what I wind up settling on is I upgrade one of my Claim the Firstborns to a Furnace Reigns. I take the Croxa out because I think this is a combo deck. I'm not going to be playing in any sort of grindy matchup, so I don't really need the Croxa value from here. And then I wind up taking out a Fatal Push, and I think I actually take out a second copy of Claim the Firstborn. I want to leave the cats in just in case like some of the aggressive attacks from the crewed vehicles need to kind of be stymied in order to preserve my life total till later, or be able to pay 3 life for the 2 Bitter Triumphs I now have in my deck. So going down on 2 claims, going down on 1 Fatal Push, and going down on 1 Croxa in order to put in 2 copies of Blot Out, 1 copy of Furnace Reigns, and the additional Bitter Triumph. Now, of note, I don't necessarily want to immediately take out all of my Claim the Firstborns, because Claim the Firstborn does have kind of like a hidden mode to it where you're kind of able to basically give one of your own creatures haste, since everything in this deck is 3 converted mana cost or less, which could be a very big deciding factor in some of these matchups where maybe I need to sneak through an additional 3 or 4 damage, so I give a Mayhem Devil or Blood Tithe Harvester haste, or I'm able to kill something with a Blood Tithe Harvester because it has haste. It could tap, sacrifice, and then wind up being the way that I win the game. So I don't want to necessarily just take all of those out. So that's why I take out 1 Fatal Push and then the Claim the Firstborns as well. So I'm actually looking, and the sideboarding process took a little while because Duncan actually winds up sideboarding a ton of cards in this matchup, which we'll go over after the second game, or maybe even later on, to see why he was sideboarding so furiously against my deck. But in my head, I'm thinking that he is bringing in board wipes. He is bringing in, if the Naya deck is running them, things like Portable Hole, which are very powerful against my Witch's Oven, very powerful against my cats, very powerful against so many things that I have in my deck. The Kolaghan's Command was a consideration because of this, but considering I wasn't 100% certain that he was what deck he was running, I didn't want to board in a card that kind of seemed overly cautious against one specific thing. It does have upside against the Portal to Phyrexia if I was worried about that, so maybe I should have brought that in instead of the Furnace Reigns, but I do kind of know that I'm basically conceding, like, cool, if you have the Portal to Phyrexia, it does trigger a bunch of sacrifices, so if I have a Mayhem Devil, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it might not be the best thing for me either, and if I only have 1 card that can kill it because I'm not running a Braids or anything like that, it's not like I can hit it with Duress or Thoughtseize from my deck. It's something that I just don't want to kind of be stuck with. The Thoughtseizes in my deck were also something I considered taking out for this matchup, but I decided to leave it in because if there are combo pieces, maybe there's Volcanic Spite in Duncan's deck, and he can kind of use that to remove a Mayhem Devil and then put the thing back to search up with Magda. So if I'm able to kind of hit one of those stray pieces from his hand, I feel like that's a little bit better than keeping in Claim the Firstborn or Fatal Push or something along those lines. But Duncan then completely surprises me with a different strategy here, which is playing Jaspera Sentinel, which taps itself and another creature to add a mana. So now I know, okay, this is like a full-on doing stuff with Magda deck, because that will tap Magda and then cause Duncan to create 2 mana because there's a treasure token that comes around with that. But instead, Duncan just kind of follows up his plays his Jaspera Sentinel and attacks. He is on a mulligan to 6. But doesn't do anything as a follow-up turn. And as you can see on the camera, we know from this perspective he has a Voice of Resurgence in hand, which he can't quite cast yet. I, on the other hand, don't have a very active hand. I have 2 Fatal Pushes and a Deadly Dispute. And Duncan draws a hate piece here, which is a... Well, A, he has a Wedding Announcement, and B, he has an Unlicensed Terse, both of which are very powerful against my style of deck. But I'm left a little bit in trouble here because I can't really deal with Wedding Announcement that easily, especially when it flips and gives this thing an extra toughness that doubles the amount of triggers I need to kill things with Mayhem Devil. So I kind of do a desperation, sack my own Witch's Oven to get additional cards into my hand. I want lands, I want big things like Mayhem Devils and stuff now to kind of clear out Duncan's board so he doesn't have anything for that Anthem effect to really be pumping up later on in the game. But this could be a decision that winds up hurting me later, because if I find the Mayhem Devil and know their sacrifice effects, then I'm not kind of able to like machine gun down Duncan's board the way that I want to. And so looking at my hand, you see I just kind of have an Unlucky Witness. I found a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I'm going to set myself up again to continue digging for a way to kind of deal with the creatures and stuff that Duncan's going to be presenting from his side of the board. And I don't have anything in my hand to deal with that. I have a couple of Fatal Pushes, but that's about it.
Good anthem for the late game.
This Unlicensed Terse from Duncan's hand is a very powerful sideboard card against me, and something I could consider bringing in the Kolaghan's Command for again if we go to a game number 3. But here is that Magda kind of combination. He winds up utilizing Jaspera Sentinel to tap Magda, even though it just got played this turn. Then he sacrifices the treasure token and then plays a Fable of the Mirror Breaker of his own. So at this point in time, I'm thinking, okay, maybe Duncan actually isn't a combo deck. Maybe Duncan is focused on a very synergistic token style of deck and is using the extra mana generation to play like a Finale of Devastation or something. I probably make a small error here in the fact that I sack this treasure token here and I Fatal Push the Magda, when in reality what I probably should have done is prevented this turn from happening by sacking that treasure token and killing the Jaspera Sentinel so that he's only able to play Magda, and then realizing that he doesn't actually play a 4th land here would have been way more powerful and kind of stuck Duncan a little bit, because then he's not able to use Jaspera Sentinel to make an additional mana and then use it later on as well. And now he has a Fable of the Mirror Breaker token, which he's able to kind of just create treasure tokens at will with, as long as he's able to, wants to attack into me profitably or maybe sacrifice it for something. So small little error on my part that I realized kind of like a turn or 2 later is what I should have done. But looking at my hand, I have an additional Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and I do end up having a Mayhem Devil in hand. But the problem is I've sacrificed that Witch's Oven, so I don't have the outlet to actually sacrifice any of my things to get that value out of the Mayhem Devil. I did wind up pitching a Ramanump Ruins because I also have a couple of lands in hand. Even though I was able to draw a bunch of these cards, I'm not able to get a ton of value out of it. So what I do here is basically attack to get a treasure token to bait out a trade between our Goblin Shaman, but Duncan doesn't bite for it. So now I'm kind of able to follow up with any number of the 3 drops that I want to play. This Mayhem Devil represents the fact that I have a Fatal Push in hand. I can also sacrifice my own Goblin Shaman to this Deadly Dispute you saw in my hand to kind of trigger 2 additional damage if I so choose to kill the Goblin Shaman or something along those lines. I can sack my own Goblin Shaman in order to do so, and it will replace a treasure token, which I'm then able to kind of use to kill off one of these humans or something that Duncan has. So I'm actually in a pretty decent position here because all of that I said, I have a Fatal Push, I have a Deadly Dispute in hand, I have this Mayhem Devil. So what I can do is sack this treasure token, I can ping down one of these, I can Deadly Dispute, sacrificing the Goblin Shaman, that winds up pinging down the other one. I can then use the treasure token to ping Duncan or ping his follow-up play, and then use the Fatal Push on either the Goblin Shaman or the Jaspera Sentinel, and that would, in theory, clear out Duncan's entire board. This is something that I am talking about now, but we'll have to see if I recognize this in the moment, because if I do, Duncan's in a bit of a bind, and he actually discards this Unlicensed Hearse to really try to be finding some of these lands that he's not hitting. And instead, he winds up playing an Amara Soul of Accord, which is problematic because Amara creates a 1/1 life linker whenever it taps. So with this Jaspera Sentinel again, if you tap the Amara is going to create a 1/1 life linker, which can then block. So I really should be pulling the trigger on that play that I talked about.
So I want to
but instead, I don't do anything. So this is a massive misplay on my behalf after looking at this game and knowing what I have in my hand, because now Duncan's able to put 2 things on the board. This wedding announcement here is about to flip, and he follows it up with a Voice of Resurgence. So again, if at any point in time I have killed this Jaspera Sentinel over the last 2 turns, Duncan is stuck on 3 land. He would have to attack with this Goblin Shaman that I can devour with my Mayhem Devil in a block in order to do this same play. But instead, I misinterpret the threats on Duncan's side. I misrepresent the board state. I think I'm farther ahead than I actually am. And I wind up killing the Goblin Shaman token, so he's not able to get lands, because I do identify that he's on 3, and I don't want him to get those extra treasures. But for some reason, I don't identify that about the Jaspera Sentinel. And this might just be because I'm unfamiliar with playing against it, even though I play a lot of Golgari Elves on Arena just to finish my quests. But I misrepresent what Duncan's deck is trying to do. I misrepresent what is going to kill me. And now with this flipped wedding announcement, all of those plays I have been talking about with my Mayhem Devil are off the table. So I have misrepresented my own threat power and misrepresented what my opponent was doing. So these have all just been massive misplays on my part. Because now we're facing down a 3/3 Voice of Resurgence, which shuts off like my Deadly Disputes and my Fatal Pushes from being things that I can use in response on my opponent's turn, because that's just going to create a XX Elemental that is as powerful as his board, which at this point in time with the Anthem effect is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then if he taps his Amara, that's 7. Sorry, 8 because of the +1/+1 from the wedding announcement. So I'm in a lot of trouble, and I don't know if I'm actually able to navigate myself out of this situation. I am now looking at this Voice of Resurgence as like a very big threat, when I still think I should be considering the Jaspera Sentinel instead. But what I wind up doing here is I flip over my Fable the Mirror Breaker, I play an Unlucky Witness, and now I'm digging for removal spells as opposed to trying to keep things in my hand or trying to do what I can with what I have in hand. I flip over this Cauldron Familiar, which would have been so great to have if I kept that Witch's Oven around from turn number 2, but I do not. So instead, I have to do a bunch of pinging shenanigans. So I wind up trying to deal with this Voice of Resurgence, which is going to leave a token behind. But if I have a removal spell in my hand, which I believe at this point in time I do have a Bitter Triumph, I'm able to kill off that token. So now I'm at the point where I just need to present enough blockers over the next couple of turns in order to survive.
Looks like a Fable land, and I can't tell what the last card is, but look at this Jam Fable here. Oh. Do we have another deadly?
So I'm just taking my time. Don't really know what I'm thinking about here. But it does. I'm able to sacrifice this treasure token, and I decide I want to play the Blood Tithe Harvester, which means that this Cauldron Familiar is no longer an option. I'm not able to play it. I have a blood token. There's 2 damage now on this 3 Voice of Resurgence, which means that now I'm priced into sacrificing this blood token in order to kill off the voice with this line that I've taken, which, as you can see, I use so many cards to deal with this Voice of Resurgence, which was not correct. It was not the correct play. It was not the correct threat that I should identify. And it leaves behind this 7/7 token now, the 6/6 that Frenchie mentioned, on top of the fact that there's +1/+1 from the wedding announcement. So I attack into the 7/7 rather than attacking into the Voice of Resurgence with damage on it to kind of save myself a bit of trouble here. So I then away my Goblin Shaman token in order to just have a treasure token that I can use next turn with my Mayhem Devil. So I just have made a cacophony of errors in this game, unfortunately. And this is what happens when you play against a deck that you're not necessarily practiced at. You don't know what your opponent's game plan is necessarily going to be. I did say that I basically did not think that he was on a combo plan in order to find like Portal to Phyrexia or Dragon Lord Atarka anymore, so I have just misevaluated which of his smaller creatures are actually the ones that are most important for me. And now I'm kind of thinking like what do I kind of want to do with my sideboard plan? Are there things I want to bring back in? Everything on his battlefield right now is 3 or less. Do I want to bring in some more of those Claim the Firstborns instead of taking them out and take out the extra Furnace Rains that I have? I have 2 claims that I've taken out in my sideboard, and I have 2 Furnace Rains in my 75, both of which are in my main deck for this game. So Duncan here does a giant swing, and the thing with this is I am very worried that if I block one of these 2/2s that there's going to be 1 damage that gets done somewhere down the line. So I'm sitting here thinking I'm at 18. This is 17 damage that is coming at my face, and I make the executive decision to take 17 damage. So I am priced into basically killing my opponent or wiping his board this following turn, which is a very tall task to do for the sack deck into a wedding announcement, and is a very tall task to do in general from the board state I'm in right now. So my opponent does wind up presenting an additional blocker here by playing this Amara, but with the legend rule, it sacrifices the old Amara, so I get a sacrifice trigger for my Mayhem Devil. And since everything is pumped up, I just kind of hit Duncan in the face. So now I need to deal 15 damage instead of 16 damage over the course of this one turn. But I do have a decent amount of stuff with which I can do. So I can copy a Mayhem Devil. I can copy a Blood Tithe Harvester. If I find Unlucky Witness, I can copy that. It'll sacrifice at the end of my turn. And then I'm able to kind of see extra cards from the top of my deck. I know that at this point I need multiple removal spells in addition to multiple sacrifice effects. So I need to be able to establish a board state that gets Duncan afraid of attacking next turn or wipe out his entire board. So what we saw in my hand was a Deadly Dispute, which is able to represent 2 additional cards that I can see. I can potentially copy the Blood Tithe Harvester and then sacrifice a blood. I can do a couple of different things here in order to turn that on. But I do believe I've drawn an additional Blood Tithe Harvester, which is great because this Blood Tithe Harvester creates a blood that I got rid of last turn, which now means that if I copy the Blood Tithe Harvester that has been around since last turn, or copy the other one, doesn't really matter. But in addition to this, I now have 2 Blood Tithe Harvesters that can give -4/-4 altogether. So I need to kind of assess, okay, what can I get rid of from Duncan's side with a -4/-4 that is impactful enough. The Amara is a 3/3, the Jaspara Sentinel is a 2/3, and everything else are 2/2s, so I'm probably going to be going after those. I could use both of them to get rid of the Elemental token, but I do believe that I have a Bitter Triumph in hand, which I can use to get rid of the Elemental token on Duncan's turn, or if I draw into a Fatal Push, the Elemental is a 0-cost token.
Oh, yeah,
So Duncan is going to respond by creating an additional creature here by just floating a mana, which is problematic for me because I'm thinking, okay, how do I get rid of all of these things that could potentially kill me? And he replaces a 3 damage threat with a 2 damage threat, which is still decent enough. But since I sacrificed the Blood Tithe Harvester, I do wind up putting a point of damage down onto the Soldier token. Then I should be able to wipe out the blocker instead of wiping out this Jaspara Sentinel again. I don't recognize the Jaspara Sentinel as a threat, I guess, this entire game, which I probably should change if I lose this game. So I get rid of the human token, so now there are 5 things left with the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki on Duncan's side, which is also problematic because it could copy something and then just give it haste and be an absolute blowout against me. But I have 3 mana so far, and I still have a couple of spells left to play. I have some blood tokens that can help me ping some things down. If I want to use all of my blood tokens, I'm able to kill off another one of these humans.
It's very, very powerful because they're just going to continue to make more
I do sacrifice the treasure token, and instead I'm going after the the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, which is probably pretty good on my side because I don't want to have that floating around and being able to copy something. I probably should have killed that with my Blood Tithe Harvester. But I wind up pitching a Fable the Mirror Breaker, drawing a card off of this blood, and then believe I activate the blood again to kill this reflection. And then I need to kind of bait my opponent into thinking I have double Fatal Push or something in order to live. But with that additional creature having been made from the Amara, that line still leaves me dead, which is unfortunate.
Not sure, but we have 2 mana left.
So I'm representing double Fatal Push, which still leaves me dead because there are 3 things on my opponent's board, when in reality I probably should have killed Jaspara Sentinel multiple turns ago, and instead I just show the Bitter Triumph that's in my hand and I concede the game. So this was expertly thrown by me, to be completely honest. I misevaluated the threat level and I kind of threw away my timing windows a lot in this game. And I don't kill the Jaspara Sentinel when he has the Magda in play. I had double Fatal Push in hand too, so if I was really worried about Magda, I could just untap and Fatal Push the Magda after I kill the Jaspara Sentinel. That would leave my opponent just stuck on 3 lands and not able to do any of the double spell turns that he did in that game. And with the board that I had, with the Blood Tithe Harvester, with the Mayhem Devil, I can then pick apart his board, even if he is able to resolve that wedding announcement, which did come down on his turn 3, so it's not like I could have prevented that from happening. But if I actually, no, because my opponent did play, he played Jaspara Sentinel in past, and then played Magda. No, he played the wedding announcement earlier. Never mind. I'm just misremembering the thing I just watched. But any of those lines that I had talked through in the actual going over of the game would have potentially put me in a better situation to maybe win that game. And would have been way, way, way more ahead on board than I wound up being there. So what winds up happening in this game after that game is identifying that there's way more low to the ground things than big things in the deck. I do still keep the Bitter Triumph in there just in case there's something big that comes around. I did wind up seeing a Seeker's Chariot, so if there's a Sky Sovereign in the deck, I still want to be able to kill that. But basically what I wind up doing is I take out one of the Furnace Rains, I put back in the Claim the Firstborn, and then I don't remember if I take out the other Furnace Rains and put in the Kolaghan's Command or not. Kolaghan's Command and Obnixilis were both cards that I was considering. Obnixilis is something that allows me to get casualty value and then be able to start kind of like picking apart my opponent's hand or life total. But the Kolaghan's Command just represents the ability to destroy something, kill something small, kill an artifact that I'm still might be worried about. I saw the Unlicensed Hearse, so I'm thinking, okay, I need something to deal with Graveyard Hate in this third game. So a couple of options that I have for myself. I do believe what I wind up doing is keeping in all my blotouts, keeping in the additional Claim the Firstborn, and I think I only took one card out. So I had 2 Furnace Rains in my deck, which means I only wind up taking out one Furnace Rains for a second copy of Claim the Firstborn. And so what's happening here is Duncan takes another mulligan down to 6. And then I look at my hand, and I have a pretty solid curve here. Like, let me go back because I knew I was on camera, so I'm trying to be a little bit nice to the casters here to reveal what I have at some points in time. So I see that I wind up having a hand that is 2 lands, Witch's Oven, Unlucky Witness, Blood Tithe Harvester, Fable the Mirror Breaker, and I'm not entirely sure what this card is. It might be a Deadly Dispute, might be a Bitter Triumph. It's something. But I have 2 lands in hand and a curve that is very similar to what happened in game number 1, where I just ran over Duncan's deck. So I'm super happy to be keeping this while he's on a mulligan.
Yeah, I know we do have a lot of folks who play Yu-Gi-Oh! Here.
Also, it says Duncan is 0-2-0, but he said he got a bye. So he should be 1-1-0, but unfortunately did not win a match before facing off against me.
You're gonna find your community here because Ryan
So
has been really big.
Duncan winds up keeping his 6, and I start off with what I did in game number 1. I find an Unlucky Witness if he wants to shock himself to get rid of it, and I get 2 cards. Great. I might find an additional land or something that I want to play.
I come out with crippling debt, so that's how cool the story is. You have a little bit everything.
So starting off with an attack, because that's what I probably should be doing. Play my Pathway on the black side, follow up with a Blood Tithe Harvester. Hey, look, it's game number 1 all over again. This is looking great for Tom, right? My opponent on the other side, there's a Tulsimer, Friend of Wolves in his hand, so he does have some big things that come into play. Has the Unlicensed Hearse, has another Wedding Announcement, and a Magda. So my opponent also has a very powerful hand for what his deck is trying to do. So you can, there's a Surge of Salvation as well, which is gives you and creatures you control hexproof from black and red spells, and then additionally prevents all damage black and red sources would deal. So that's a very good thing to have against the black and red deck that wants to ping things down 1 damage at a time. But my opponent Duncan just plays out this Unlicensed Hearse, says like no cat oven shenanigans for you. I have an oven in hand. And I don't know if I have a cat, but I am very heavily considering my next play because, unfortunately for me, I have found a second Blood Tithe Harvester to, again, mimic what happened in game number 1, but I do not find a 3rd land, which, despite having 22 in the list, is something that happens somewhat frequently to the Rakdos Sacrifice deck. It's fine most of the time because you wind up having ways to create treasure tokens and your mana curve kind of caps out at 3, but it is not the best thing all the time when you are only able to play 1 spell per turn, and one of those spells you can play is not Fable the Mirror Breaker and not Mayhem Devil, which are your best 2 cards in this deck. But Duncan has his 3rd land, has pretty much whatever he wants to do available to him, and we are going to see the Magda being played here. Now, Magda can crew the Unlicensed Hearse any point in time just to generate an additional mana, so Duncan will pop up to 4, pop up to 5, like very, very quickly if I don't kill the Magda.
which on turn 3.
But I do have a very powerful board right here.
Also, too, like, Thompson
So
really
I think I can
shocking
just kind of do
a,
whatever I
land
want
not
and
do
attack.
anything with it.
So if he
Little
trades with the
suspicious.
Magda, I'm like excited about that. And I'm perfectly fine. It's the same thing as if I were to tap and sacrifice the Blood Tithe Harvester. However, we mentioned that Surge of Salvation in Duncan's hand, and it doesn't blow me out, but it keeps the Magda safe from anything. And since I don't have a Fatal Push in hand, I actually have Double Oven, Double Fable, Deadly Dispute. So the best thing I'm actually able to do from this situation is just use this dead Blood Tithe Harvester to generate value and try to find my third mana, which is exactly the play I decided to make. I wind up getting a treasure token, so that can be my third mana, and since I've done only just attack before doing anything else, I still have a land drop that I can hit, and I have the ability to then play 2 spells if I really want to. But instead, I wind up finding a third Witch's Oven and passing the turn, because I do not want to play that oven. I want to save that treasure token to play one of the Fable the Mirror Breakers, so I can keep digging away to find my third land in case I don't find it. So Unlicensed Source starts doing what Unlicensed Source likes to do, which is exile cards from my graveyard. It's very good. Again, if he thinks I still have Croxa in my deck, it's just very powerful to make this thing into a powerful blocker that gets very big and out of the range of all of my things with just one more activation. He does wind up doing the Crew It with Magda play, so he gets an additional mana available. It's a little Lotus Petal at the end of turn. Now with no kind of blockers or available mana besides I did wind up using the treasure token to play the Witch's Oven, sorry, because instead of wanting to play my Fable the Mirror Breaker, I can now just sack this Unlucky Witness and look at the top 2 cards at the end of turn. But here, my opponent does something very powerful, which is plays a Tolsimir Friend of Wolves. And
then just kill the Blood Tithe.
I read the card very quickly because I want to make sure that if he gains the life or not, if I sacrifice the Blood Tithe Harvester, but I then also decide I don't want him to have a wolf sticking around. So instead, I just let my Blood Tithe Harvester die. My opponent gains some life, and now I'm really priced into digging for my third mana. So I sack this Unlucky Witness, exile the top 2 cards. There is no mana available. Instead, I wind up having a Claim the Firstborn and a second Unlucky Witness, which is the theme of this game is unlucky, unfortunately. So my play right now, as Frenchie is kind of outlining, is Claim the Firstborn steals Magda. It also generates another treasure token for me, which is very fruitful since I used mine to get this Witch's Oven online. So this Unlucky Witness goes away. I can now attack with Magda. He can trade with, he doesn't trade, but he can just eat it with Tolsimir if he really wants to, which means that I have a Witch's Oven activation available if I so choose. So I'm thinking about it. I'm like, wait, I don't need to do that. He's just going to lose his own Magda here. He's saving 2 damage because he's been able to shock himself down to a decent amount, and I attacked a couple of times.
This is really what can happen. When,
so I let the Magda die.
I
I have an additional treasure token here, and then I have a cat. So now I realize that despite my opponent having Unlicensed Hearse, I have the access to 2 food tokens, so I can at least eat one of these attacks that this Tolsimir is going to do. So I don't have to worry about losing my cat to this Unlicensed Hearse because I'll be able to respond to the Hearse activation and eat a second food to bring the cat back. So this is what I decided to do here. I want to get my opponent as low on life as possible, even though I'm super low on resources, because if at any point in time I'm able to get rid of this Unlicensed Hearse, unlocking the cat is how I win this game. But my opponent then plays a very powerful follow-up, which is Wedding Announcement. So now my opponent is going to be generating tokens every turn. And in 3 turns' time, we'll have an Anthem effect. That means any sort of Mayhem Devils or follow-up effects I have to deal damage are going to be very difficult for me to deal with. So we see here that I sack the food, he responds, I bring the Cauldron Familiar back, and he's only able to eat 1 additional card from my graveyard. And so now I have a cat online that can, at least this turn, attack if I really want it to, but then I will lose lose the ability to kind of loop it back with food. So my hand is very, very awkward here There's a blot out, 2 witches ovens, and then 3 Fable of the Mirror Breakers. Now, I know people say that Fable is a very powerful card in Pioneer, but when you have 3 of them in your hand and you really want land, it's not where you want to be. So this continues to be a struggle bus of a game for me. But I am looking at using this treasure token to play one of these Fables. I get a blocker. It can make treasure tokens on its own. And next turn, I can discard extra ovens and extra Fables to try to finally find my 3rd mana source, or 3rd land for the turn, or the game. So this is basically all I'm able to do. Just play this Goblin Shaman, and now I have to play defense with my cat, because what happens here is Duncan is priced into attacking with his Tulsimir. If I double block, that's good for him, because I have to either lose my cat entirely to the Unlicensed Curse, or I lose one of my creatures. So I'm just basically priced into block with the cat, sacrifice it, keep the food there, so that he can't use his Unlicensed Curse, because if he ever uses the Unlicensed Curse, the cat comes back. If I ever use the food to bring the cat back, I lose my cat to the Unlicensed Curse. So it's like a game of chicken, and basically what this does is it buys me time, which is all I need in this game, because with 3 Fables, Cat Oven, and a couple of ovens I can pitch to these Fables, I just need to find mana and Mayhem Devil. I need to find mana and Blood Tithe Harvester. I need to find something. So my opponent, thankfully, is slowly building up his board. Opts into playing the Amara here to kind of be able to generate token value off of this by crewing the Unlicensed Curse rather than playing the Fable the Mirror Breaker in hand. But as you can see, these tokens are threatening to run me over, because my Cat Oven shenanigans are currently offline, and my Cat Oven shenanigans can only block one thing at a time. So once this wedding announcement pops and everything kind of gets large, I'm in trouble. So I wind up pitching Fable the Mirror Breaker and Witch's Oven to my Fable the Mirror Breaker. And as Kyle pointed out there, I find a Hive of the Eye Tyrant, which is normally a very good creature land to have in this deck and in these situations. But it comes into play tapped land since I have 2 mana already. So I do also wind up finding a Claim the Firstborn. So Claim the Firstborn is going to be something I can do to get rid of the Amara. He can still tap the Amara here if he wants to, which will crew the Unlicensed Hearse. So it makes the Hearse a creature. It creates a token, but I'm able to find get the Amara, and I'm able to make a token of my own, which then kind of evens out things as far as blockers go. Because I'm definitely going to attack with this Amara. Because if he trades with it, that's great. His Amara is dead. I don't have to worry about it anymore. But I'm also attacking here with this Goblin Shaman to create a treasure token, because off of some of those card draws, I have also found a removal spell. And what I want to do here is use this removal spell to get rid of the Unlicensed Hearse while it's a creature. So my opponent has been executing his game plan of go wide, but has now opened up his card that is preventing me from stalling the game out and potentially winning with Cat Oven loops to being vulnerable to removal spells. So you can see at the front of my hand, I have a Bitter Triumph. So I'm still at a very healthy life total. We're pointing out that this is not the right human token. It's actually a soldier with lifelink. But I'm at a healthy life total, so I can just use this Bitter Triumph, pay 3 life, and just get rid of this Unlicensed Hearse. And then I have my Stone Wall of Cat Oven blocks online. So at this point, despite being super far behind on resources this entire game, I've been able to navigate my situation into a scenario that benefits me by stalling out the game and having what is basically a 9-turn clock on my opponent. So my opponent is, however, going to have, what is it, Wanderer's Smite or something, the Convoke, destroy a target attacking or tapped or whatever creature. So he's able to deal with my Goblin Shaman token, but at the cost of his Unlicensed Hearse.
That means the cat is free.
And as Frenchie says, that means the cat's free now. So I sacrifice this Amara. I get the food back, and now I'm able to not only have my cat online to block, but I can bring it back, block, and then bring it back again, even though my oven is tapped. And now I found my third land. I still have one additional Witch's Oven and one additional Fable of the Mirror Breaker in my hand, and I am about to have a Fable of the Mirror Breaker flip into a reflection of Kiki Jiki. And that, with cat, is very powerful because it creates a cat that drains on entry, can attack pretty much whatever, because as long as there's no lifelink, which there is one lifelinker on Duncan's side right now, it doesn't matter if it dies. It doesn't matter if it goes unblocked. That's just one free chip damage. But I have the availability to now gain life, stall out a little bit, and hopefully take my opponent down in the next 4 or so turns. This pesky Jaspara Sentinel comes back. Thankfully, I don't think I'm at the point where I need to really worry about it with no Amaras or Magdas on the battlefield, but my opponent does throw down a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. This wedding announcement, using the wrong dice so that we can't really see it on the camera, unfortunately, but this wedding announcement now is on 2 counters. So that means it's going to flip. So next turn, everything is going to be large from Duncan's side. And large is very problematic for me unless I'm able to put up multiple blockers in the next turn, which I can do by copying something with my Reflection of Kiki Jiki. I can do by making a Goblin Shaman token, but do I really want to be throwing away my Shaman token? Not really. I'm behind on mana. I could really use the mana. But Duncan attacks in with 2 things. Neither of them have lifelink. So I'm just going to block one of them with the cat. And since I don't need to do oven shenanigans, my oven is tapped and I have an additional food, I'm just going to trade them off, which is great because now there's one less threat on Duncan's side that I have to worry about. It's done an additional damage to him thanks to this cat loop. And now I've been Duncan down to 6, which means that 6 cat oven loops or potentially 3 cats just with this Fable the Mirror Breaker flipping means that Duncan is looking pretty dead or close to it.
Yeah, so let's see what the top deck here.
The thing is now is that it's basically a race to, can I find enough things to block and stall, or can I find something else that will put pressure down on Duncan in enough time to do this. Now, the second Witch's Oven in my hand presents 2 cat oven loops every turn, which means that this is now a 3-turn clock for Duncan. The Fable, the Reflection of Kiki Jiki puts an additional 1 damage on the board each turn, which means now it is a 2-turn clock for Duncan if I want to play it that way. However, I decide instead that I want to play a blot out to get rid of this Tulsimir Friend of Wolves. I've had this blot out in my deck since game 2. I've had this blot out for a situation where I need to get rid of something extremely large, and by destroying this Tulsimir, finding a 4th land and playing this follow-up oven, my cat can now block the lifelinker, my own lifelink token that I made off of my opponent's Amara as he discards 2 lands and draws into land and something else. But now that I have all of this stuff available, I can kind of stall out very well. So my opponent does wind up finding additional Amara, and now going to get value off of the Jaspara Sentinel from doing so as well. So he gets a human token with lifelink, which is bad for me. He gets Sokenzan tokens as well. I kind of put my hands on my head because I'm afraid of the fact that there's a ton of tokens coming my way. These Sokenzan tokens are 2/2s as well. So now I'm put under pressure again because my opponent is swinging with everything. He's going to get a treasure token. He has no cards in hand, however, so I know that everything he has is face up on the board. So there is 8 damage coming into me from the tokens on the bottom, and then 3 coming in from the Goblin Shaman. So I know that I can prevent my opponent from gaining life here by blocking the cat on the life linker, which keeps my clock available to him. And then I decide to conserve life this time around rather than just go down to 1 like I did in game number 2. So I'm actually going to wind up only taking 5 damage here altogether. And then I will wind up draining Duncan for 2, putting him down to 4, which at this point in time, I'm able to create a copy of the cat. I'm able to do 2 more cat drain triggers, which will put my opponent down to 1. And with the board that Duncan has right now, if I get rid of that 1 blocker that he has, my opponent's dead on board.
It's so much nicer to do this in paper.
Oh,
instead of
yeah.
doing a ton of clicks
So
on
now,
the remote.
kind of need to pray. Kind of need to see, do I have a removal spell? Do I have a land to activate my Hive of the Eye Tyrant, which does not leave my
so
cat
this is
plan on
smart because
board,
you're
but
gonna
since
instantly
there's
get
only
a
1
drain
blocker,
on
my
your
opponent wouldn't be able to
and
block.
then
He'd go
that's
down
the
to
only
3, or go down to
great
1,
ability
taking
to
3
Rakdos
damage,
because
and then my
Rakdos
cat
is
loop
the
would kill
best
him.
idea to attack
So
into it.
instead,
However,
I don't draw the
on the flip
land,
side,
so I
you
need to
just
go for the cat
sacrifice
plant.
the
So
creature
now I
that's
have
so
my opponent,
there's
most
kind of a
importantly, has a
interesting
life
pushback
linker,
here
which
on
is
how Tom is
problematic.
supposed to
Because if I
operate.
attack with both
He's pretty
things
close
here,
to
I'm going to
having-
pause for a second because this is a little important. If I attack with both of these, my opponent can block the copy with the lifelink token. If my opponent blocks the copy and I sacrifice it to prevent him from gaining life, he will take 1 damage, go down to 2, sack the cat, bring it back, sack the cat, bring it back, and then he winds up dying. My opponent blocks my actual cat. I have to sack the cat. He takes 1 damage, goes down to 2, and then should die. So, in theory, I should kill my opponent right here with an attack. However, if I sacrifice the copy, my cat does not go to the graveyard, right? So if he blocks the copy and my copy dies, or I sack the copy to prevent the life, I don't have a way to put my cat in the graveyard. So the only thing that I can do is attack with my 1 cat, do the cat loop, and put him down to 1, which means that I need to be able to kill this lifelink token. Otherwise, I can't kill my opponent because I do not have a profitable attack here. It is all on his side to decide how that attack pans out. So instead, I have a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, I have a land in hand, and I have 2 blood tokens from the beginning of the game. So what I wind up doing is trying to play to my outs because I am not dead on the crackback. Like, if I don't do anything here, my opponent stays at 3. There's a 3-3, 3-3. This is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So this is 17 damage coming across. I can eat 3 of it, which would put me down to 14. I could go up to 13. And if I do it again, I go up to 12. So I'm actually exactly dead if my opponent attacks. So I know that I need to end the game this turn by getting rid of this blocker somehow, or finding a Claim the Firstborn to steal it.
He was hoping that top deck was a Mayhem Devil.
Mayhem Devil from the top of my deck also would have been lethal because then I have the extra triggers. As the time and round timer goes off, which is just a little kitchen timer that we have at the table. But I have all these potential things that I could have done, but now that I am down to 2 mana, or 1 mana in hand, and then the potential Mayhem Devil that I had there, I need to do something a little desperate. I draw a Deadly Dispute, which finds me an additional mana, but also draws me 2 cards instead of drawing 1 off of that blood token. So now with this remaining treasure token, I find the fatal push that I need. I kill the blocker. I swing in for 2, and my opponent is dead to my cat oven loops. So somehow, from being stuck on 2 mana, I'm able to navigate myself into a situation where I beat the wedding announcement, I beat my opponent's unlicensed hearse, and I'm actually able to kind of come back into the game somehow after basically being out of it for the entirety of it. So even though my opponent was looking to get a lot of value out of his Amara by activating it in order to crew that unlicensed hearse, that play single-handedly lost my opponent the game because it not only bought me enough time to have my cat eat up some of these attacks and preserve some life total, gain some life, and take some chip damage at my opponent, but it was legitimately the thing that won me the game. Without that cat, I would have not been able to pressure my opponent's life total. I would have been in a situation where I just maybe play out that Fable the Mirror Breaker. I maybe wind up Fatal pushing away the reflection of Kiki Jiki and then kind of barely hanging on, and then my opponent, is at like 4 or 5 higher life, is gaining life off of his life link 2/2s now, and I'm just priced into a situation where I just really need like a miracle to happen, or I need Mayhem Devil, copy Mayhem Devil, get multiple sacrifice triggers to clear a board, or maybe kill my opponent from what would be like double-digit HP at that point. So very, very small missteps from Duncan in game number 3 wind up leading a pathway open to get victory from my deck despite being stuck on 2 lands. But we had massive misplays in game number 2, and that's also just probably part of the fact that I haven't touched this deck for a very long time. I had no idea what Duncan was playing, and I just misidentified the power that the Jaspyro Sentinel was able to do when my opponent was stuck on lands. I did not fully utilize my timing windows on my instance and my activations, and it just wound up losing me a game that I probably should have won, and then I wound up winning a game I probably shouldn't have lost to kind of cap that off. So all in all, I wound up going 2-1 on the evening with this Rakdos Sacrifice deck. I actually lost round number 1 to our buddy Pluid, who was playing a Soul Flayer deck. I did not find any of my sacrifice effects, so the Soul Flayers ran me over. I played against Eric, who has actually helped set up the stream, helped run the stream, has done a little bit of the casting as well. He was borrowing Kyle's deck and was playing Blue Black Mill, and even though I got Tasha's Hideous Laughter for about 14 cards, and he breakinged me for all of my Mayhem Devils and most of my Witches Ovens, I was able to win that series as well. And then I wound up playing against Duncan on stream, who we just saw how that matchup went. So 2-1 with the Rakdos Sacrifice deck. Didn't play against any metagame decks. Don't think that the deck has any really good matchups against the metagame. I just really wanted to play something I enjoyed, while I didn't have to worry about doing the stream for a week or so, and Frenchie, Kyle, and Eric were able to kind of hold it down for me. So that's how the Rakdos Sacrifice deck went. I am not a perfect Magic the Gathering player, but hopefully you've been able to identify things that you may find in your own gameplay, such as when your opponent plays a card that generates mana and they don't have any land drops, you should probably kill that card. So Jaspyro Sentinel may be worth killing with your Fatal Pushes from now on. But hopefully that kind of brings you through my thought process of knowing, okay, I know what's in my deck, even if I don't know what my opponent is playing. I need to be able to pursue this line of play because that is the one out that I have, like I did in game number 3. And then hopefully, like the way that I was playing and like what wound up unfolding in game number 3, you get rewarded for some of those choices that you've made. So if you've liked content like this, let me know in the comments down below. And of course, give the video a thumbs up to let me know that you've enjoyed it. That way I can decide if I want to do more of these for my own gameplay, or maybe I just want to go back and look at some of the other card art videos and do kind of the same thing, but from other people's perspectives. So if you've liked this kind of replay analysis and gameplay evaluation, make sure to let me know. And if you like all my other Magic content, you could of course tap that subscribe button to stay up to date on my latest deck tags, metagame analysis, and all of that general Magic content goodness. Well, see you later.